there's always some root, even if it's habitual and you're like, I don't know what's causing it. Well, there's a reason it's happening. So I think once we peel back the layers and get there, we can figure it out.
Okay, let's dive in. So today we're going to talk about relationships with food, identifying and shifting thought patterns around food, a lot of post-show things. I feel like this is something that most competitors deal with. I'm sure you created this program with that need in mind. So we're going to dive into a bunch of stuff today. So thanks for being on again today, Celeste. I'm very excited. Got a lot of positive feedback from our initial podcast. So I thought we would dive into a more specific topic today.
Yeah, I super appreciate that. The podcast feedback was awesome to hear. So I'm glad that people wanted me back too.
Yeah, it was great. I got a lot of positive feedback. So as a competitor yourself, having gone through this process, we both have. And I know for myself, I know how much the food aspect changed my relationship with food post-show, right? Going into it, I dabbled with diets and things like that and had normal, what I would consider air quotes, normal body image perceptions of myself. And it wasn't anything over the top. And then competition, the structured food, the decrease in calories, all of the things that come with prep, I was not prepared for what happened post-show. And that is what I find a lot of clients struggle with, what I like to help them with, obviously working with me, as a coach. I'm sure you deal with this as well. So what prompted you to put together a program that would guide women? Because I feel like this is an unmet need in the bodybuilding market for sure.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, I love how you said this is common. I think people listening feel like they're the only ones struggling. They're certainly not. Like, just for perspective, I've had over 1,000 people go through the free series, and I've helped over hundreds of women through the actual program. So you're definitely not alone. I've also helped a lot of men. So if there's men listening, you're not alone in this either. Yeah. And I think what prompted it, there was a few things, but I'll keep it short and to the point. What prompted it was I started the podcast, kept hearing this problem. I was like, I know how to help people solve this problem. I was getting my bachelor's degree in psychology, and I was focusing all my studies on mindfulness-based eating, body image, food relationship, specifically with athletes in mind. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm already helping Jen Pop with this. And this whole time my message has been build more than just a body. I should apply it to bodybuilders. So I started doing all this market research, spoke on the phone with at least 30 different female competitors, really identified what it was that they've struggled with, and then developed this program. And it started very small, and it's evolved a ton because, of course, I've evolved. I've expanded my education, knowledge, and then you just get more experience. So that's what prompted it was, yes, an unmet need that I knew that I could resolve and that I was going to be the best person to do it, because I'm not a mental health professional that's going to tell you have to quit bodybuilding or your fitness goals to have peace with food. I just don't believe that. I think you can have progress in both areas, and you should not treat one extreme with another.
Right. Do you find that when you work with clients, and either in this capacity where they go through a program or you work with them one-on-one, you can decipher okay, it's probably not a good time right now for you to go into another prep. Let's currently work on some other things that are going to set you up mindset-wise, body-wise before you go into another prep, or because I'm sure that's a very different journey for different people.
Yeah, and that's a really great question, because I've worked with people in their preps so that they can have a better time post-show, or so they can get the most out of their preps, because some people are mindlessly snacking and binging even during prep, and so we can address that. And I've told people hey, jumping into a prep isn't going to solve your problems. You're more than welcome to start a prep while we do this program. I'm never going to tell someone to do something or not do something. I really want to respect their autonomy. But if someone asks me, I'll outright tell them, given where you're at now, this isn't the best place to be starting. And I think that the reason we address and need to address the mental side of things is so we can have more fulfilling and empowering journeys that we really enjoy. versus ones where we're white knuckling it. We feel like we're prepping out of a control mechanism. It's our only way to get back to, people associate prep with control.
Yes.
Versus seeing it as, oh, this is just another day in the life. So that's part of the problem. And I went through that. I had post-show binges. I had bad reverse diets. I had negative experiences with my body image. I had disordered eating before competing. So I understand how it feels. I know that desire to get back on a diet, get back on prep, that's going to solve everything. It will amplify your next post-show experience if you don't address it. So yes, I'll tell people that, but if they decide to prep anyways, I just do my best to support them through that and out of it.
Yeah. Did you experience that yourself where, because I know that I did, right? Like when I started competing in 2011, there wasn't any awareness that, to my knowledge, around these kinds of issues. And I had a male coach, which there's nothing wrong with male coaches. There's fantastic male coaches. There wasn't really a relatability factor. He was just like, well, stop cheating on your diet. And I'm like, it's not that easy. Like, I'm glad that you have iron will, but like, it's not that easy. So what was happening is I did one show, the classic competitor that, thought I was going to be able to keep that look after the show. Oh, I'll be able to do it. Did not. There was no way. I think I gained 20 pounds back within like 2 or 3 weeks. And then it was like, I need to do another show to fix the mess from that show. And I did that 3 times that season, and then did it again with my bikini merged to bikini for a short minute. Did you do that as well personally in the beginning stages of prep?
It was really similar to that. Like, I was that all or nothing, like, I'm 110% on my meal plan. I was following a bro diet. And then as soon as post show happened, I didn't know anything about it. I wasn't prepared. And I binged. I gained like 30 pounds in 3 weeks, like much like yourself, like gaining a lot of weight very quickly. I had up and down appetite, wanting to binge, wanting to eat everything, not wanting to eat anything, falling back into what was already pre-existing before competing. And I want to make that clear, because I think competing was a crutch for me to say, I'm not eating this because I'm on prep. But then it became much worse. And I had a lot of the body image struggle, because you get used to celebrating. What I think is a major problem actually in the industry is the consistent celebration of weight drops, physique tightening up, changes like that, and not enough focus on the actual process that's leading to it. Because the process through prep is going to be very similar out of a prep and into an improvement season even. Your habits are going to be very similar. So we need to celebrate that, because when we're celebrating the drops, we're consistently reinforcing that that's better. So when we see the scale coming back up, we see the fat coming back on, lines disappearing a bit. Now our brain is thinking this is negative. This is a threat to maybe community, fitting in, how we're going to feel in our confidence. So it weighs on us even heavier. So yeah, I definitely experienced it myself. I let go of competing for a bit after I experienced it. I became that jaded competitor. And then I found my way, and I was like, you know what? I want to prove that you can compete and have, and at the time I didn't know I was going to do all this, but I still wanted that. That was still my message and mission. And I made that happen. And then I had a very successful first reverse. And then, the rest is history with what I shared before.
So yeah. And to your point, as a coach, it's a challenging position to be in, right? A client hires me or a coach for a desired outcome. And as a coach, I'm looking at very objective measures of like, okay, we're going to hit the target, right? Like, we clearly need to drop scale weight. We clearly need to drop inches. Like, there are measurables that need to move in that process to get them to stage. I feel like my responsibility in that journey is also, because I don't generally take clients on and like, let's jump right into a prep, right? I'm like, we need to date for a while, like I need to make sure that you understand the process and we have your metabolism, primed and ready to go. And so in that pre-prep prep is what I call it, is I'm doing a lot of like mindset coaching and like getting them to understand like calories are good. You should feel strong now. We're not trying to be lean, all the things. We're not working on scale goals right now. We're just staying at maintenance and, getting your calories up. And then I shift into prep mode with them. And I'm like, okay, coach's hat is on. This is where we need to go. And so it's a fine line, because I feel as well torn where I'm like, fuck, I don't want them to be fixated on the scale. But as a coach, there are certain points where like we have to know, like last time we got on stage at this weight, and are we on track to be on that similar path besides just a visual feedback of you being show ready? So how do you suggest like coaches like myself or coaches in general essentially make that process streamlined for athletes to understand that like this is where we're at right now for this desired goal, and it's not going to be like that post show, and that's okay. We're focusing on different things. And that's generally how I try to, but I know there's got to be some, some resources for coaches and clients to understand that, we have to make those targets.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I've worked with other coaches and teams before on how they can better set up their check-ins so that clients aren't as fixated on the physique, on the weight, on those things, because then they're always hearing the complaints and the weight's not moving, right? So what I recommend is have other variables that are being checked in on before weight is reported even, or if someone is reporting difficulties with seeing their weight change, encourage them to identify other things happening throughout the week when they're doing their check-in before they identify what their weight is. So also don't have them maybe weigh in before they take their photos. Like, hey, take your photos first, then take your weight. Reflect on your week, then do your check-in photos, then do your weigh-in, because that's going to create a focus on the process versus the actual outcome. And we always want to prioritize the process. So if you're a coach and you're listening to this and you're wondering, how do we do that? Really focus on like, hey, how are things going with the process? Like what's happening with the nutrition, the training? What are we proud of? What are we excited about? What are we grateful for? And then have them check in with like the weight, the scale changes, the body changes. Encourage a prioritization shift where it's not immediately weigh yourself. It's immediately reflect on what did you execute on that you can sustain for a long period of time and be proud of.
I love that. We do have a question on our check-in sheet. It's actually, I think like the first or second question where it's, what have your successes been this week? And they do not need to be scale related, right? And I think as a coach, for me, that's important to see. And I also have a question on there about their stress. Like, how's your stress been? Because we all know that, well, most of us in this industry, how stress affects your body, right? Like the way that it looks, the way that you weigh on the scale, all the things. So it's important for me when I do have clients that are, 6 weeks out and the scale's not moving or whatever, we're stuck. And I'm like, let's focus on the successes. You're checking off the boxes. We just do the next thing. And it's important, and I have some clients where I can tell they're going down this like negative spiral with the scale. And I know that they're going to be fine. Like we're on track. It just the body sometimes doesn't respond. And I just tell them, okay, we're not weighing this week. Like we're not even doing that. Don't even touch it. Give your scale to your husband, your children, something. They need to hide that, right? I've done that so many times just to get them to have that sense of relief. And I feel like sometimes when they know they don't have to weigh in, it almost drops their cortisol a little bit. And then when they, go back to weigh in, they're like surprised. They're like, oh my gosh, I dropped 2 pounds. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. Because you weren't fixated that every morning you had to get on the scale. And it was like this response in your body.
Yeah, definitely. I think separating from the scale for a bit can definitely be helpful. And in that time away, focus on repairing your relationship with yourself, with your body image, with the scale in general and the numbers that you see. So that way the focus can change from when you do get back to weighing and you're not then hyper fixating through exposure.
Yes. And sometimes too, I'll have my clients, I just tell them like, I just want you, we're just weighing twice this week. That's it. Just twice, like I just need some data and we're going to leave it at that. And then you just, do the things that you need to do for the rest of the time. So yeah, very, very interesting position to be in because it is such an aesthetically driven sport. And a lot of that is driven by not just, the photos, but scale, has to eventually make its way down for most people. So
yes.
Yeah.
And you should know that going into this sport as well. Like, you're trying to tighten up, you're going to have a fix. Like there's automatic risk factors as soon as you commit to this sport. Risk factors being that you're going to be moderating your food intake. You're going to have to be focusing on certain areas of your body more. I guarantee you, I sometimes will do this for fun when I speak at events, but I'll do it here. If you guys are listening and you can identify like your best selfie spot in the house, and which mirror looks the best at the gym, if your eyes immediately go to your shoulders or glutes, bikini competitors, especially your waist. So we can see how this sport has impacted the way we view ourselves. The risk factors are we're meeting criteria. We are creating a body every single day, and every action we're taking, because it's a 24/7 sport, is fixated on meeting criteria and getting in front of judges to approve us for if we did meet that criteria, how closely did we come or not, compared to the girl next to us. And it can change show to show, day to day. So you have to really be happy with that process of achieving that and understand going into it, just because there's risk factors doesn't mean you can't set yourself up for what we call in the psych world protective factors. So you want to identify what protective factors do I have in place to combat or support me through the risk factors. And I'm going to do a shameless plug, if you don't mind. If you are struggling with scale and you're wanting some more support with that, in my food relationship program and in my on-demand mindset coaching platform, I have a full workshop on the scale, as well as a PDF that goes deep dive into it with activities you can do and reflection you can do. So I do want to encourage you guys, if you are considering work with me, it's not just food. We're digging into a lot of different things, and I'll always equip you with what you need to be successful.
I love that. I'll link that all up in the show notes too, because I think it's super important. I think even for women who don't compete, who have continuously, grown up with the diet culture and just, being inundated with marketing and things like that, which magazines, tend, not so much anymore, but back in the day when people actually read magazines, everything was, 6-pack abs, and we're all walking around like, why can't I look like that? I just remember that all the time, like the grocery store, in the checkout line, and seeing like Muscle and Fitness Hers or Oxygen at the time or whatever. And I'm like, God, why can't I just look like that?
Totally.
And I'm like,
for me, it was like album covers, like Pussycat Dolls, Gwen Stefani. I'm like, I should look like she does.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, I get it now, right? Like, that's not normal. Like, that's, most people don't walk around looking like that all year round. Some do. Some are genetically blessed, and some do it for a living, so they stay photo shoot ready all the time. But the average, everyday, even slightly above average, right? Like, we train and all the things, doesn't look like that all the time. It's just not realistic, Yes. Yeah. So in your free food relationship coaching series that you offer, can you tell us a little bit more about what that looks like? I know that you have on here discovering your ideal relationship with food. Is it like a video program? Is it PDFs? Give us a little bit of a peek into what that's like.
Yeah. So once you sign up, every single day for 8 days, you'll be sent a psychoeducational video. So I'm explaining a topic or a concern, or walking you through a process I'm going to take you through, that's then delivered in the PDF workbook that comes with the program. And yes, it is free again. So you get the whole PDF, you get all the videos, and then an email is delivered with that, and it breaks down the main points. And then in the PDF, you're guided through the actual practice. And then people can send that to me. I have some people going through it right now, and I'll communicate back and give you feedback as well. If you do the work and you show up, I'll support you through that. And then at the end of the program, there's a full workshop on mindless snacking and eating that I threw in there. And then I also have another email that gets delivered that's just the full entire series in one. So you can save that email in case you want to revisit, or you missed a day, or it landed in spam on day 3, but you got all the other days. So it's all delivered at the end in one chunk too.
Oh, I love that. Okay. So something that stood out, which you just mentioned, because I know I hear about this often, all the time, is the mindless snacking. Now, can you give us just a couple tips, like what you usually recommend on that, or essentially what your thoughts are with handling that? Because that tends to ruin a lot of fat loss in general, but preps for sure. And, and binging too. But I think mindless snacking tends to be a hard habit for people to break.
For sure. Well, right off the top of my head, there's a lot of things going on.
Yeah, dump them all.
Spit it out. Okay.
Yes.
So first and foremost, I think some people are really motivated by the impact behaviors can have on the goal that they're trying to achieve. So if you're a person who's generally motivated by pain or even pleasure, identify what the impact is of mindless snacking. So maybe how those extra calories could be adding up into your weekly total and how that could be affecting your progress. Maybe identify how it's making you feel throughout the day. Maybe you feel heavier, lethargic, bloated. You're not feeling comfortable in your skin. Also identify how it could be affecting your confidence because you're not following through on what you say you're going to do. So some people who are motivated by like the impact, I would say start there. And then also what can help is it's usually habitual. So identify when it's happening in the day. Is it usually right when you get home from work? Is it usually like as you're meal prepping things or you're making food for other people? Like when is the mindless snacking happening? Because some people want to attack it when it's happening versus go to the source. So we want to swim upstream, figure out when these things are actually occurring on a most consistent basis so we can get ahead of it. If it is happening at consistent times during the day, now you have insight into how to set yourself up at those times of days. Maybe identify what the mindless snacking is bringing your life. Maybe it feels like a relief or freedom, or it feels like a sense of rebellion. And then you can actually explore other ways to fulfill those needs outside of food. And then the other thing I'll say, since a lot of times, again, it is habitual, challenge your environment. So look around and see how accessible are these things to me? How easy am I making it on myself to actually mindlessly snack? So I like to use pattern interruptions, like visual ones. So take some Post-it notes or some bright stickers. If you have kids, this is a really fun activity too. You can tell them to hide stickers around the house, and every time you see a sticker, you have to take a mindful moment, and you can do that with your kids or you can do that on your own. Because I know some parents are like, I don't have time for this. I'm like, but if you get your kids involved, that is more fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, put stickers either on the things you tend to snack on or just around the house as a reminder to take a mindful moment. And my last piece of advice, and if you do go through the series, you'll get some questions to equip this, but ask yourself a couple questions before eating anything. Like, why am I really eating this? How am I going to feel after? Take a moment to challenge your association, or change your association between you and food, because the current neural pathway makes it easy to just eat. But if we interrupt that pathway, we put a rock in it, almost like water flowing down a stream. Now we're going to redirect the water to go somewhere else. The rock are the questions you ask yourself before you eat. Now you're changing your brain chemistry to be like, I ask myself mindful questions before I eat anything. So you start thinking differently about the choices you make, which is really the basis of the 5-week program too. Mm-hmm. But that's just, I would say those are a good place to start if you're mindlessly snacking.
Such great tips. So what I hear you saying, like in the first half of that, was the mindless eating, the snacking, it's more of like a symptom of something else that's like happening. And you have to just reverse engineer where things aren't working. So you aren't experiencing that symptom of, maybe you're not eating enough earlier in the day. Maybe it's a stress trigger or something like that. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's always some root, even if it's habitual and you're like, I don't know what's causing it. Well, there's a reason it's happening. So I think once we peel back the layers and get there, we can figure it out. Even if it's just on a behavioral standpoint, like it's just changing your environment, now you've already made a difference. If it is emotional, we address that. If it is not setting yourself up early in the day, hunger levels, then you can address it. Water intake, supplements, all that. That stuff I leave to the coaches, but at least from the mental side of things, yeah, those are some important pieces.
Wonderful. So shifting gears a tiny bit, but it's essentially can be related, do you find that you notice self-sabotage patterns sometimes with people too? Because I find like I'm guilty of this as well. Like I'm doing a mini cut right now for summer, and I know I'm not in prep, right? Like I'm not going to be in a sparkly bikini and like reporting to a coach that I need to be like shredded and like looking a certain way. So it's more for like a fun goal. And there's times where I find myself self-sabotaging. I see clients do it all the time. Do you have some tools or suggestions or any experience with dealing with self-sabotage?
That is a big one for sure. I think it's very common. Like we all do it. A lot of times we're comfortable where we're at, even if we want a little change. Sometimes we minimize in the moment of self-sabotage. We minimize what it is we're working towards, and that helps us sabotage. So one thing we could do is identify what part of ourselves maybe doesn't believe that we're worthy of those results. Maybe what part of ourselves doesn't feel we're capable of that, or just minimizing the impact of actually achieving that result. Because I believe that we're the sum of many parts. So we're this one person, yes, but there's many combating parts of us. It's like the angel and devil on our shoulder. Mm-hmm. So there's like hundreds of angels and devils all throughout us, and they're constantly combating. So we can make sure they're assigned roles so they understand, or we understand them and they understand each other. We can better work as a individual. So I would take some time to really investigate, like, what part of me wants to engage in this behavior? And what does that part of me need to know in order to understand that it can do something else to satisfy that desire, or we can give it a different role, or, hey, its strength is actually like fun and engaging in this and letting yourself have spontaneity. Mm-hmm. So maybe we're like, hey, part, like, what can we do instead? The other thing with self-sabotage too is, like, if it's tending to come up always right before you reach the goal, or maybe right in the beginning, really identify what it is that would align with your life in a whole perspective. Because what tends to happen is people are like, and I think we touched on this last time, people are like, know your why. And I think that there's a missing piece, which is to actually understand your values. So when I'm having clients who are dealing with a lot of self-sabotage, or they're just not wanting to follow through consistently, we want to look, and even if they've made great progress, this is awesome just for overall success, but look at your values, the things that you really value at your core, and how the goals or objectives that you've set that match those goals align with those values. Because control and willpower is often that perceived need, but I think congruency is the actual need. So rather than feeding the perceived need of, I need more willpower, I need more control, I need to restrict myself, we look at, like, how do I make this actually flow and be easier in my life? And a great way of doing that is connect it with the things that matter most, because our why changes more frequently than our core values.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. I'm just like, as you're saying that all, I'm thinking, like, for me, I'm classically known for, I like prep because I can control the variables, right? And, like, there's so much out of our control every day that this gives me control.
Yep.
And, now it's not so much. Again, I don't have the heat of being on stage. So when you said, align with your core values, for me, that's like being a person of integrity and authenticity and things like that. And so when I'm, partaking in self-sabotage type behaviors where I know, like, okay, this isn't in alignment with your goal, it's also not in alignment with, like, who I am as a person too. So that makes perfect sense. And that's a great, like, pattern interrupt for sure.
Love that. That was such a good example that you provided. Yeah. It makes us, like, hold ourselves accountable. And if we say, like, what happens if I don't follow through on this? We're not just sacrificing a goal in the summer that we know we'll get there. And there's extreme methods that can get us there too. So we can keep putting it off, and it's no big deal. But when we look at it from that broad perspective, it's like, oh, wow, I can't do that. Because if I do that, then I'm sacrificing this value of mine.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Okay. So one of the other things in your course is you talk about cravings, right? And figuring out what you're craving versus is there something else going on? Do you usually have, like, a formula for this? Because this is another one. It's like snacking, craving, and things like that I hear constantly as a coach. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we could take, like, a exposure standpoint and be like, well, just incorporate those things into your macros if possible, or something similar if you can. The other thing is I like to zoom out a little bit. What am I craving? Why am I really craving it? So kind of going back to, is this coming from some other need? If you're blessed to have a coach, talk to your coach about the craving. They might identify holes in your nutrition, especially if you're following a macro diet. You may actually be lacking certain nutrient properties. And if you're following a meal plan that's very bro style, you're probably lacking something. So it makes sense that you're craving it. Another thing, I like to paint the picture of, like, appetite versus hunger. And sometimes they can coexist, right? We can have an appetite and we can be hungry at the same time. Sometimes we don't have an appetite, but we feel hungry. Mm-hmm. That's kind of difficult. Like, sometimes when we're on medication, things like that can happen. Or even just when you're going to be eating a lot of the same things, you might lose your appetite. But when you have both aligned, you're, like, making choices that satisfy you on many levels. And that's great. So when you're in a position of I'm craving something, ask if it's like a present hunger, if there's a present hunger there. And if there is, like what scale you're feeling that at. And then meet it according to that scale. A lot of times people meet the craving according to a scale that's non-existent. So they're not even that hungry, but they eat the craving as though they're super hungry, rather than like, I'm actually like maybe a 3 out of 10 on a hunger fullness scale. So I could satisfy this craving for an Oreo with one Oreo. Now people are listening going, I've never just had one Oreo in my life. Well, that's where we work in more of the exposure. We got to normalize those foods so they become just as random or less exciting as something else. So I would say identify physiological versus psychological from that perspective. Really understand, what am I craving? Why am I craving it? Talk to your coach if there's nutrient needs, maybe find the holes in your diet, but then also know that it is okay to satisfy those cravings. A lot of times it's just the telling ourselves we can't that makes us fixate on it more, versus I can satisfy this craving. I'm choosing not to today, or I'm choosing to with this in mind.
I love that. So as far as that, tips for that, when you have a client who you're working with them and they've been really, either restrictive, or they have this mindset of like, I can't eat that. That's a bad food. Like it's not on my meal plan. And I'm craving it. When I have it, I eat the whole thing because it's a FOMO issue, right? Like I got to eat the whole thing. I got to get rid of it. How do you usually reintroduce like trigger foods or foods that are classically known to send a particular person into a binge moment, or just like it's a craving that's just unsatisfiable. Like they just have to eat the whole thing, right? Like I've been there. So I totally get that. Do you have any tips for that, or how you usually work with clients on that?
Yeah. So what I'll tell you is, you go on TikTok, you go on Instagram, there's influencers telling you, we'll just start eating it, right? Just F the diet, anti this, anti that, just start eating whatever you want all the time. And eventually none of it will matter. It's the all-in approach that I'm super against, because it's an extreme meeting another extreme. What's forgotten when people take the all-in approach is there's actually an exposure hierarchy that we each have. Similarly, like if you have any other fear, there's an underlying fear with these foods. You're fearful that you're going to binge, overeat, sabotage your success. So that means we need to have consideration for that actual fear level. If someone was scared of snakes, we would take them through an exposure hierarchy. We're not just going to throw a snake at them and say, yeah, pet the snake, now you're good. It's a process. They could be very, like on a distress tolerance level, they might be very scared to even look at a cartoon snake or watch a video of that. So it's similar, and it's very widely used with trauma treatment as well. It's like you do natural exposure, but you have to be mindful of the individual. So I think it's a mistake when a lot of people try to address it on their own. Like, I'm just going to introduce all these foods. That's reinforcing the mindset of extremism and all or nothing. So I would say, look at what causes you distress, rate those distress levels when you think about eating a certain amount of food. I've had clients who are like, I am not ready to have 5 chocolate chips a day. Because that's what I did personally. I just had 5 chocolate chips a day and took them as mental vitamins.
I love that.
I took them with my vitamins.
Yeah.
And I was like, these are my mental vitamins. And it worked well for me. And then I got up to 1 Oreo a day. And I was like, okay, I'm good. And then with macro tracking and making swaps and stuff, I got more comfortable with not being so strict. But it took time. And I have clients who are like, I'm not comfortable with that yet. I'm like, would you be comfortable with us like tracking it? Or let's use this product instead. Maybe that would feel better. It's the same type of association with the person. People are like, well, I want to be able to eat regular Oreos. We'll get there, but maybe we need to start with this, because then your association with that type of food begins to change, where we're increasing safety and confidence. Now the confidence to address, like with a new food or expose more, is built because we already developed this. Sometimes we can't even do it with the food, because I'll be working with people on very, very restrictive diets who can't even use food to incorporate this. So we have to look at other areas of their life where we might be able to build that type of esteem within themselves, to be able to trust themselves. That has nothing to do with food. It's not as easy. Yeah. I'll say that. It's not my preferred method with clients, but it's a method I'll utilize just to be able to build that trust in themselves.
That's amazing. Yeah. It's definitely, it's a tricky spot to be in. I think, I believe we maybe touched on this the last podcast, where, prep, I don't want to say prep is the easy part, but the prep is like, you know you only have these macros or you only have this meal plan, right? And if you eat off of that, you know the consequences are likely going to be you're going to be further out from being ready from a show and things like that. But you have this container that you are like in, and you know that it's like your safe place, and this is the outcome will come at the end of, you know, whatever your prep is, however long it is. And then once you step off the stage and you don't have a show or another goal or something like that, you kind of feel like lost in the wild, naked and afraid.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Literally.
what do I do with my hands? I don't know what to eat. I don't know how to train. Like, what cardio, you know? And like, that's why I always tell people it's never, at least in my opinion, it is not a good idea to do a contest prep by yourself. Unless you, I mean, have done the research, you understand the process, but it's just generally not a good idea. Having somebody who has done this before, or they have coached people to do it before and has been through a multitude of scenarios that can guide you through the process is ideal, because no one is generally prepared for the aftermath of what is prep. And it's not for all people don't have that experience, but a very large percentage of them do. So prep is it's a beast, and you have all the parameters to get on stage. And then afterwards, it's so helpful to work with a coach so you have a plan coming out. And I think a lot of people feel like the post-show part is going to be easier than the prep. And I personally think that it's actually harder the first probably 8 weeks, sometimes 12, almost, you know, depending if you were in a very long prep, sometimes as long as the prep itself, to recalibrate, because lots of things have to recalibrate, like hormones, you know, adjusting to real life. And, you know, what are your thoughts on that in guiding women out of a prep scenario?
Yeah, I would agree that if you can have a professional supporting you through that process, that's awesome. I also think that there's a lot of fear new competitors have because of so much being seen online with difficulties with reverse dieting, or even podcasts, you know, where we talk about the struggles, but it's very real. And it's not to deter anyone from competing. It's just to say, hey, you need to set yourself up for success after the show if you want to have some sort of maintenance or even success into a future prep, because we've all been there and it's a very dark place to be. Doesn't mean you shouldn't try to prep, though. I think people need to be aware that you don't need to experience it to be a good competitor, to get through it or understand. Like, it's better, I think, to address it before it's a problem than it is to let it become a problem, try to fix it on your own, and then resort to getting help. Because I see that all the time. Like, I just got to learn on my own. I just got to figure it out myself. And it's like, there's a reason coaches and professionals exist. Like, we understand that process and we're willing and able to help you through it in a way that, sure, you could get there on your own, going through the entire A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, you know, and back and forth, or we could just take you from A to Z much more seamlessly without question, because we've been there and we've helped so many other people do it. So I want to encourage people, no, you don't have to go through it alone. I would encourage you not to go through it alone, and understand, yes, there's potential difficulties that will come from it, but it doesn't have to be so hard. It can be easier.
Yeah, I definitely hear that often, right? I have clients. I feel like a lot of times it's mostly my first time competitors who really weren't prepared for the rigors of prep and like how intense it was going to be, you know, especially if we're pushing to get them pretty lean towards the end and they have to sometimes do 2-a-days, right? Like, you know, that life. And then coming out, their expectations of you just cease, you know, they don't stick to I call it a recovery phase, less of a like reverse, where we're trying to get you in a recovery mode, get your calories up, get your hormones back on track. But some people will just cut cardio cold turkey because they're like, I'm sick of it. I don't want to do that anymore. They'll cut their training back. They'll start eating out a significant amount and they weren't prior. I usually tell clients, like, the worst thing you can possibly do is book an all-inclusive vacation. I feel like maybe we kind of talked about that too, but post-show where you just are an uncaged, you know, lion and just have no control, right? Understandably so. But I think it's normal to feel like, oh, I'll get this, or I'm just going to go back to being normal. But you're not normal after that. It's not normal. And I try to get girls to not quit. And I used to say, like, if you're going to work with me for a prep, I require you to stay post prep for at least 8 weeks. So 2 more months for me to like walk you out of that fire and you recalibrate. But the second they think that they're like messing up their recovery phase, like, oh, it's not going well, forget it. I'm just going to do it myself. I'm not going to pay for stuff that I'm not really doing anyways. It's such a flawed way of thinking. At least I think.
I would agree with you. And I've been there personally. I remember too, my body image was so skewed that I thought I was so far gone that I just kept binging and then trying to work it all off and struggling so hard post show because my eyes hadn't actually really fully adjusted or processed the change that was occurring on my body. So what I saw, I thought I blew up. I hadn't. And also because I had binged, I started seeing my body in a negative light because I knew I wasn't doing what I said I was going to do. So we have to understand even the way we perceive ourselves and our body changes can be skewed to a point where it will then sabotage our behavior or lead to sabotaging behavior. You might think you've messed up, you're too far gone, you're never going to get through it, whatever, it doesn't matter, I'm just going to go to normal life and everything will be fine. I really, really encourage you to step back and think, if there's a possibility my mindset was a little skewed at the end of prep, wondering if I'd be ready, is it possible that I'm also a little skewed now? Yes. So keep it real with yourself, with your coach, and at least I think if I could tell a first-time competitor anything, it's don't do this for the prep and for the stage. Do this as though your life would never be anything but this again. And I know that's a very extreme way of thinking, but you have to prepare for that 12 months even post-show if you're in a long prep, 6 months post-show. This becomes a lifestyle. Now, it doesn't have to mean like, okay, you could prep and compete one time and never compete again. That's totally fine. But you got to recover out of that and then utilize the strength you gain from committing to this process for coming out of it and then living your life outside of competing after this, rather than I competed, now I say screw it. Those people I think end up worse and more yo-yo dieting than those who are like, okay, it was an experience. And part of that experience is successful. Successful, by the way, doesn't mean 100%. Successful reverse diet is just doing the best you can with what you have, in my opinion, and communicating that so you're set up for success. Some people, it's let's go into recovery calories, especially if you're not going to compete for a while. I know a lot of coaches bring them up right away. Some take a slower approach. Communicate with your coach so they know, because otherwise they don't. I don't do nutrition coaching. I don't do fitness coaching because I like that for people like yourself. I like the mental side of things, but you have to understand there's multiple ways to get where you want to go. And if you just fall off the face of the earth and stop communicating, you're going to have a harder time.
I think that's great what you mentioned about even if you never compete, if you decide you don't want to compete again, take the positive from that experience. And I cannot tell you how much I attribute my success in my success to the podcast, my success to my business, to what I learned in bodybuilding and like understanding that if I set myself up for a goal and I focused and I did all the things every day, even though I didn't notice the changes that day, that the culmination of that consistency produced an amazing result, which was doing a show, getting on stage, doing really well, and carrying that mindset and those types of habits and structure into other things in my life has been life-changing. I mean, I have the chills just even saying that, because I didn't grow up like understanding, seeing my parents really, they just worked blue collar jobs and they were content. And, we were broke and, it was just, nobody went to college. It was just like, we just were doing the thing. And then I was kind of like, okay, this is just how I was raised and this is my destiny too. And then when I started getting really into fitness and then competing, I'm like, whoa, like I'm stronger than I think, and I can actually apply this into other areas. Let's see what the fuck happens. And it's crazy, so even if you don't have those body goals anymore, like what could you possibly achieve somewhere else in your relationship, in your career, in school, and apply that same structure and goal setting process, it's really remarkable. I think it sets up a lot of people for success once they go through a prep and understand the rigors of that.
Agreed. And the meaning you make of anything really does matter, because someone could walk off their first show and they could be like, and they maybe didn't place, but they gave everything they could. And they're like, I'm just such a failure. I never achieved what I set out to. And that's the mindset they take moving forward in their life versus, wow, I did everything I could. I'm proud of myself with that. I stepped on stage. I didn't get what I wanted, but it doesn't mean that I didn't get rewarded in other ways. That's a different mentality. It's a choice. What meaning you make is highly dependent on what you're going to focus on and how you're going to sit and really reflect on your journey. So don't dismiss it if you didn't win or if you didn't place or you didn't look how you wanted. Know that you committed day in and day out. Take those wins. At least gather some evidence for yourself to move forward with a refreshed and renewed and strengthened perspective versus one of failure.
Yes, I agree. And also understanding, I have clients. Again, not everybody wins a show. Not everybody places top 5. Sometimes you come in dead last. But my question always to my clients is like, what did you learn about yourself in this process? Like, I know that some people think that's some tree hugger shit, but it's like, it's real, right? Like, what did you learn about yourself in this process that you set your mind to a specific goal and you achieved it? We can never, at the end of the day, predict who's going to show up for a show. You can't predict any of those outcomes, but what you can predict is what you do and your outcomes and what that looks like. So I encourage women, if you go into a prep scenario or contest prep, it really is about the journey as much as you don't think it is. You're like, oh, I just got to get to stage. You have to be able to look back and reflect on everything that you accomplished, not so much just the actual tactical thing, right? Like, oh, I did my meal prep. It's the consistency, the discipline, the mindset, and all the things that went into that for you to be able to execute that when everything else around you was still happening. Life still happens, right? Dogs die, kids get sick, people die, people lose jobs. And for you to be able to withstand the rigors of prep, which some people will never understand.
Yep.
With that going on, I mean, you deserve a medal just for that. You really do.
100%. Yes.
Yeah. It's great stuff. Okay. Just to wrap up, thank you so much for this. It was really great. I loved deep diving. I'm like, my mind is already thinking about potential future podcasts because it's such a juicy, meaty topic. And I have a coach that I work with for communications and podcasts and things like that. And I just told him, I said, I love what I do. I absolutely love it. I love fitness. It's transformed my life. But I'm ready to shift conversations on the podcast that aren't so like, how do I lose belly fat? And like, what macros should I be if I'm this, and this? And I'm like, I think we're missing the bigger picture with a lot of mindset that's around these types of goals and things like that. And when you can really get to know yourself and understand the psychology behind the things, the way that we behave and the reason why you do the things that you do, it sets you up so much better, not only in life, but for achieving big, big goals like this.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. Although I will argue that I think you've done a great job of that already. And knowing you want to continue to do that, I'm sure it's only going to be even better.
Yeah. I appreciate that. It's just, you learn as you evolve through your own journey and working with people and like, wow, this is a current recurring problem or theme that I'm hearing. And I find that like looking at your topics in your course, it's spot on with all of the things that, I know that I hear from my athletes. So it's, I'm excited to share that with my audience and have them go through it. And then what are your follow-up courses to this? So you have this great food relationship coaching series. If they want to dive deeper, like what's the next step after that? And then, after that, is there a potential to like work with you and all that? Give us the good.
Yeah, for sure. So essentially you'll go through the free series if that's what piques your interest first. You can always hop straight into the 5-week food relationship coaching program if you prefer. But let's say you go through the free series, it'll invite you to apply to the 5-week food relationship program. And then you can do that. You have to apply to work with me because if I can't help you, I'm going to send you in the direction of someone who can, or I'm going to let you know what I can help you with. So we're setting the stage for realistic expectations. Mm-hmm. And also it helps me get to know you. So just understand that the 5-week food relationship program is generally what people will go through after the 8-day series. I do encourage you to continue to expand on your work, because most people tell me, wow, I can't believe I came this far with the free series. Imagine with actually working with Celeste hands-on, like 100%, it's going to be tailored to you. It's not just like, yeah, you're going to get this thing and then go execute. Like, we're building together. People then sometimes will continue working with me in one-on-one coaching beyond that as well, with continued calls or email check-ins, things of that nature. But I would say that's generally like the course of action people take. But I do have the on-demand mindset coaching platform. So for those of you who were interested in the scale workshop or any other topics we discussed, the on-demand platform, you go in, you say, I'm in prep or I'm in my improvement season. You click which one you are, you say what you're struggling with from a series of different topics. Let's say it's body image, you click body image, and then you say, I'm struggling with how I view myself in the mirror, or I'm constantly judging myself, or I'm fluffier now, or whatever. So you click what you're struggling with. It'll redirect you to a full PDF. Sometimes that's with a video to support you, sometimes with psychoeducation, and then an activity to complete that's going to help you to work through that. And then you're also going to get access to tons of bonus resources, food and mood charts, hunger fullness scale, a Facebook support group, and you get every single replay of any group call I've ever done, including a full Ideal Life coaching series and the 5-week program and the on-demand. So, I mean, it's never ending. And that's literally only $9.99 a month, $9.99. So it's like Netflix for competitors. There's no cancel or join fee. So I highly recommend you could just hop on, check it out, and then see if you like it. And if you do, great, you could stay, or you can dip out anytime.
I love that. It sounds like it's like back in my time, we used to have these books where you'd read a book and it's like, okay, choose your destination. So like, if you want to do this, like read this chapter, so it's like, if you're struggling with this, then you pull down this menu and let's solve that problem. Like that's really brilliant. Very nice.
Thank you.
Very nice. Choose your destination. What are you feeling today? Okay. Yes. So where can people find you? Give us all the details, and I'll of course link it in the show notes for sure.
Yes. So I'm on Instagram, celestial_fit. I have my website, www.celestial.fit. That's where you'll find all those resources and more. And then pretty much every social platform, YouTube, Facebook, etc. But I would start there, and then you can always reach out to me if you want those links as well.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, thank you for the work you're putting into the world. We need to get it into more hands and, make the bodybuilding experience more attainable for people, and, have them have more clarity around their journey and the outcome, and embrace it as a positive experience and not a negative one. And I think when people can work with you in tandem with their prep scenario, like I'm going to start really pushing this to my clients to go through that. I almost feel like I want to make it a prerequisite before they go into prep.
That'd be awesome.
And I think other coaches would be well suited to do the same. It's definitely not going to hurt. It's going to improve your experience and at least shine a light on some things that can potentially be issues in the future. And at least you'll be prepared for that and know that it's coming and how to handle it. So thank you for your work. And I'm excited to see how things unfold.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I appreciate that support.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you enjoy the show this weekend. I'll be looking forward to your Instagram story updates, and
yes.
We'll have to do this again soon.
I would love it.
Thank you for listening to Boss Bitch Radio. It would mean the world to me if you could rate and review the podcast. If you could give us a 5-star review on iTunes, drop us a little comment. We will read those, and we offer prizes as a ethical bribe for you to leave us some great mojo and words of affirmation. That is my love language. And also, if you're over on Spotify, you can rate and review it there as well. All of this helps other women, other people, other folks see us, hear us, and learn from all of the amazing boss bitch tools and hacks, and hopefully get some LOLs. And if not, if anything, if you could share this with one person, I'd love you forever. And I know you are just here for my undying love. And last but not least, please, 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 please come find me over on Instagram so we can be buddies. We can be Insta fam over there. I am Diane Flores _IFBB_pro. come say hi, drop me a DM, let me know what you think of the podcast. I'm always open for new suggestions and feedback as well. And I hope you listen again soon.